The first time was easy enough. Celia positioned herself so that she could see the moon's reflection in the shallow puddle, knelt, and drank. When the puddle was empty, Celia straightened and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She didn't need to look up to know that the moon was no longer in the sky as she felt its cool glow within her, but she did anyway, and it was gone. Celia walked out of the forest, feeling the dissonance of deep satisfaction tinged with the absence that sometimes comes with getting that for which you had so desperately yearned. She returned home and settled into bed, the weight of the moon pressing her deep into her mattress. For the first time since the moon had begun to call to her, she slept through the night. When Celia woke the next day, though, she felt the tug of the moon stronger than ever. She tried to summon its twinge, but where she had felt solidity the night before, hovered an all too familiar absence. Still, Celia was firm in what she had seen the night prior, an inch-wide gap gloating among the stars where the moon had previously hung, a space whose irregularity made it both an absence and a presence in the familiar night sky. Night began to fall, though, and Celia's pulse raced against the descent of the dark in anticipation of what may or may not be to come. As the moon rose in the east like it had every evening prior, Celia felt her heart drop through the empty cavern it had left behind inside of her. She knew that she had to try again. Wondering if the puddle she'd swallowed had been too small to hold enough of the moon's essence to keep it contained, Celia journeyed to a nearby lake in which she could see the moon waxing in the still water. Once again, she knelt and drank, and drank and drank, until she drained the entirety of the lake, moon and all. She watched the now stranded fish flop against the lake bed and observed that their scales no longer reflected any light. Sure enough, when she craned her neck to look up, that same space was open in that same sky. The moon was, once again, hers. Though the lake was not a large one, it contained more water than Celia's body was used to taking on. To accommodate it, her skin stretched taut, and Celia's once slight frame almost doubled in size. This pleased her, as every time she felt a new part of herself move on her walk home, it reminded her of the feat she had accomplished. She had swallowed the moon. The next morning, however, Celia was back to her normal shape. She didn't let herself linger in her devastation for long, however, and knew that she couldn't wait for nightfall to come to confirm the suspicion that the moon had left her behind. This time, Celia fled to the coast. With a few bats of her eyelashes, she secured a spot on a boat beginning a 3-day crabbing journey north. She watched the afternoon dwindle from the deck of the boat and marveled at the way the craft submitted to the sea, the ship bowing to the rhythm of the sail's every billow. Night descended, and, as predicted, the moon stared defiantly at Celia from its place in the sky. Full, it looked like a hole punched into the paper of the night. Any fears that she had about the task that lay ahead of her paled in comparison to the thought of her lips around the moon's pockmarked skin. Celia thought of all the nights she had spent tossing and turning, listening to it croon to her. On those nights, Celia had watched her tempter cross the sky with a lover's admiration, its every movement a droplet of wax sealing her fate. Once her fellow travelers were off to bed, Celia leapt off the deck of the boat, trying her best to make as small a splash as possible on her landing, and swam toward the moon's reflection on the sea. For the third time in 3 nights, Celia opened her mouth and drank. And drank, and drank, and drank, and drank. She drank for hours, and as she sipped, the waves surrounding her grew first quiet and then still, as the tides realized they had no moon to govern them any longer. After still more hours, Celia felt herself eased to the floor of what had been the ocean. She had drunk the water out from under her feet and stood solidly next to the ship that had taken her to fulfill her deepest desire. Like the night previously, Celia's body had expanded to accommodate the water it had taken on, but instead of a lake, she had swallowed an entire ocean. Her skin was stretched so far as to become almost translucent, and her body swelled to the size of a train car. And there she sat on what had been the ocean floor and wept the salty tears of gratitude. Seeking respite from its flight in the moonless sky, a gull landed atop the mountain of Celia's torso. In doing so, the bird pricked a tiny hole in the drum-tight skin of her middle with its webbed talon. A trickle of water began to seep from the wound, and it quickly widened into a gash. Water poured forth from Celia in a great wave, and the opening grew and grew until it spanned the length of her rapidly deflating torso. The force of the water's gush pushed apart the 2 sides of her now split body so far that they began to come together, but inside out. The skin of her left side careened over the crabbing ship that carried the recently awoken sailors and scooped them toward what was quickly becoming Celia's inside. When Celia's skin met itself behind what used to be her back, the pressure of the water caused it to fuse, her flesh knitting together and trapping the boat inside of her. The force of the water's exodus lengthened and transmuted Celia's arms into fins and brought her legs together into a massive tail. As the ship traveled down the gullet of the great white whale that Celia had become, the full moon struggled to free itself from her innards. The boat blocked passage through Celia's throat, leaving the moon no choice but to flee upwards. Like a magnet toward a pole, the moon crashed through Celia's skin, leaving behind a perfect circle, her blowhole, on its journey to its rightful place in the night sky.